Tonight, our distinguished keynote speaker will examine the state of democracy in America today from her vantage point of over 30 years on the bench, including as the first woman to be appointed to the United States Supreme Court. She will be introduced by her friend and colleague, David Souter. Here in New Hampshire, we are justifiably proud to have had Justice Souter represent the best of the Granite State in his service on the High Court. It is my great honor to welcome Justice Souter back to the Capitol Center for the Arts stage, along with Justice O'Connor for the first time here, to launch another year of Constitutionally Speaking.
Thank you, Debbie. Let me start with good news. And by the way, I am not making this up. This afternoon, about 3 o'clock, I was talking on the phone with the Chief Justice of the United States, and I mentioned what Justice O'Connor and I were going to be doing a couple of hours later. I said, you know, we're out there to beat the drum for civics education. And he said, oh gosh, civics education. He said, my son Jack in the 8th grade has just had his first civics test. And I said, there's a civics test somewhere? And I said, that is good news. But that is simply a preface to my responsibility this evening, which is to welcome Justice O'Connor here and to New Hampshire, and it's one of those honors that in fact really doesn't carry any obligation with it, because you don't need to be introduced to Justice O'Connor. You already know, there's nobody in this room who doesn't know that she is the first woman ever appointed to the Supreme Court of the United States. And after that applause, she may be the first woman to run from New Hampshire for the presidency of the United States. But, before that, she was an Arizona state judge, a legislator in Arizona, and you know all that. So I thought I would take the opportunity to say a few words by telling you a couple of things that you probably don't know about. And let me start by simply referring to a little schedule that I have in my pocket about what we're going to be doing this evening. And the fact is, I can read this schedule thanks to Justice O'Connor. I'm not making this up either. And I'll tell you how that happened. As you probably all know, members of the Supreme Court have law clerks. We all have 4 apiece to help us out. And it's a tough job. They have to do research. They have to examine and help analyze the petitions for review that come in. They have a lot to do. But Justice O'Connor's law clerks have one responsibility that none of the other clerks have. And that is, at Halloween time, they have the responsibility to make a jack-o'-lantern. And I don't mean just the kind that I used to make, with 2 eyes and a wedge-shaped nose and a mouth with a tooth in it. I mean, they're supposed to be the sort of things that would win a jack-o'-lantern contest if there were such a thing. And she's tough to work for. And exactly 20 years ago, when Justice Breyer first arrived at the Supreme Court, Their assignment was more specific than usual because she said they were to make a jack-o'-lantern that looked like Justice Breyer. So they went out and they bought some cotton batting to make it look like hair and so on. And Justice Breyer, in those days now too, I guess, wore glasses, and he wore the kind of little narrow ones that you could look over the top of and so on. So the clerks went out to the nearest drugstore and they bought a pair of glasses to go on the pumpkin. And everybody came in and admired it, and it really was a very fine job. And a couple of days after Halloween, I was working in my chambers, and suddenly Justice O'Connor was there at the door. And she had the glasses in her hand. And she said, "I've noticed that when you're sitting on the bench and you want to refer to a brief or your notes, you've been holding them rather far out." And she said, "I think you could use these." It's 20 years later, and there is not a day that goes by that I have not had these glasses on.
Is that the glasses?
These are the ones.
Oh my
yeah.
God. Wow.
I meant it when I said I was not making it up.
That's pretty funny.
I've certainly got my money's worth out of it. But Justice O'Connor is also responsible for something
funny.
else that I am able to see and would not have seen, or certainly would not have seen so soon without her. Back about, I guess, 12, 13 years ago now, some of you may remember that there were a number of attacks on the judiciary and on the independence of the judiciary as a result of some decisions, some of them in state courts, some in federal courts around the country, that a lot of people didn't like. And of course, it is in the nature of judicial decisions that a lot of people are not going to like them. The reason we have constitutions is that in times of stress, people want to do things that with better judgment they wouldn't do. And that's what a constitution is there to stop, and judges are there to enforce the constitution. So the fact that people get mad from time to time is not surprising. But there seemed to be a strong swell of even vituperative disagreement with the decisions. And Justice O'Connor, actually with Justice Breyer as a partner on it, decided that it was time to have a conference of people of influence and importance to discuss the problem of how the judiciary is to be defended from these attacks on judicial independence. Because if they succeed, we're all in trouble. And I remember the conference was held early in September, and I remember learning about it, and I thought, another conference. I've got to go. It would be rude if I didn't show up, and so on. But it turned out to be a big surprise to me, because we learned one basic thing that I have to admit had not crossed my mind, and I don't think it had been in the minds of most people there, and that is that it didn't make much sense to talk about and to argue about in the public forum, to argue about judicial independence, for the simple reason that at least 2/3 of the people in the United States had no idea of how the government was even organized.
That's right.
2/3 of the people in the United States did not know, could not name 3 branches of government.
Yeah.
If you don't know the structure of the government, then to talk about judicial independence is to talk in a vacuum. Independence from whom?
Yeah.
For what reason? And the conference identified the problem as being more basic than attacks on judges. The problem was a growing civic ignorance in the American population. And it was equally obvious that that problem was one which threatened the very continuation of what we would call a genuine constitutional democracy in the United States. It threatened it for the simple reason that nobody ever loved anything that he didn't even know about.
Right.
No one can responsibly criticize something that he has no idea when he has no idea of its structure and what might be improved or what ought to be retained. And the problem was a growing ignorance of civics. The thing that was shocking to people like me and people of my generation was that when I was going to school, we had a junior high school civics course and a senior high school civics course. And what 2/3 of the people in the United States could not tell you the names of the 3 branches of government. When I was going to school, any kid who managed to graduate from the 8th grade could have told you. I could have managed. And you know, so could everybody else in my class. And it was that tipped a lot of us off to what had been happening, and that was the disappearance and the diminution of civics teaching in America's public schools. So it was Justice O'Connor and that first meeting of hers that she called together that opened my eyes and let me see something that I did not realize was very threatening to democracy in the United States. And because Justice O'Connor is the kind of person who tends to respond to a problem by trying to solve it, she has been working to improve civic education ever since. You're going to hear before the evening's over, or you're going to hear about the website that she had such a great hand in forming. Probably a lot of you already know it, iCivics, with everything from curriculum material to video games that end up teaching you something about civics. And she is the sort of the patron saint of groups like those in New Hampshire, of which I am a member of one, that are working to support the restoration and the improvement of civics education right here. So there is, in fact, no one in the United States who has done more for the improvement of civics education than Justice O'Connor. And if that would not be enough to make us very grateful to have her here, I will tell you that besides all that, I love her to pieces. And so will...
Well, now
So-
you
so
know
will-
why
so will
I'm
you.
glad to be here. It was such a joy to be able, privileged to serve on the U.S. Supreme Court and to serve for some time with one of your citizens of this very state who's on the podium with me tonight. And it was such a joy to have him on the court. I can tell you that. It was just fabulous. And I was very sad when the time came that I would no longer be privileged to be sitting with him on the court and to enjoy his company on a regular basis. So it was a great treat to come and to be here tonight and to be with you for a little while. Now, you really produced some good things in this state. And this is one of the best you've ever produced.
She did not say that when we were disagreeing on the Supreme
Well,
Court.
no, of course not, but I can say it now that I can look back. And we don't have anything pending. Nothing is pending.